I have a few questions here that's going to get the ball rolling, and then we're going to open the floor up to questions. So pretty much ask anything that you guys would like of this extremely diverse panel. And we want to also thank Borderless Live for having us. They've been doing some amazing things in the space of diversity and content creation, and it's wonderful to be here. So thank you guys. So the first question I'm going to ask, and we're going to start with Jamie. How did you get into content creation and representation, and who were some of your idols?
I think for me, it kind of was a bizarre situation where I didn't really know the full expanse of content creation in a business level, on an influencer level, until somebody offered me some money for it. And I was like, okay, cool. It was a situation where I actually just used social media as like a catharsis, so as like a diary, as like a way for me to actually just share what I want to say without anyone telling me that I can't, in a way. And then it was only kind of when people realised that the content that I was producing was fairly unique, or it had a certain aesthetic to it, that people were like, okay, well, we want you to now create this type of content. So I guess I fell into it. In terms of idols, I mainly look at people who don't, who have content creation as an aspect of their job, not as their full-time job. Not that that's a bad thing, but personally for me, I find it more inspirational when people just kind of creatively do it sporadically rather than constantly. So I find that a bit monotonous.
Sassy?
For me, I got into it basically because I'm blind, and lots of people always ask me the same question of how do you cope, how do you get around, where's your carer, and how do you even leave the house without support. The blog kind of came from that, and it's advanced into things I'm passionate about, like travel. But for me, I actually have chronic illness and mental illness, so the blog covers those topics. And I guess basically the people that inspired me, my idols, were a couple of people in the blogosphere and YouTube sphere at the time who were very new. They were visually impaired or had chronic illness, and they were just showing the world that having a disability wasn't this taboo thing, and that we were normal people, quote unquote, just like everyone else. And that's basically what inspired me to do it. So I was answering questions as well as just showing the world this is what I do.
So when I first started blogging about travel, I didn't really cover the plus size aspect, and then I started getting lots of people asking me questions, and they'd always say, oh, how do you find doing this? Do you have any top tips? And it wasn't until then that I realised I had a niche that people wanted to know about. And the more I started sharing my advice and my honest stories, the more people would come to me and open up to me, and the thought of helping people just made me want to carry on even more. I'd say my biggest inspirations are, we're talking today about Annette Richmond. She's amazing, she's incredible. I love Marcy San Diego. So many people that are fighting for diversity, and I love all of them.
So I want to come back to the question and start this next one with you. What challenges and difficulties have you faced when trying to create content for your audience specifically? I know for myself, I find that it's difficult to balance between my work specifically geared towards my community, specifically African American men, and the work for the general audience, and finding a balance there. That's been one of the difficulties I've tried to navigate over the years.
Yeah, I definitely find it difficult because not all of my audience is plus size. So I think a lot of people have actually spoken to me and said, I love that you're representing people that I may not have considered before, so they like to follow me for that. And then people also say that I teach them things that they didn't know, and they also have the same kind of questions, so it helps them out as well.
Yeah, I think for me, like the message that I try and put out about the LGBT community or the trans community is, although yes, it is more aligned with people who are within that community when it comes to creating content, I would never say that that message is purely just for those people. So if you're following me or if you engage with that content, I don't think really it matters if you are in that community. You should be able to engage with it in some way, whether or not you're learning from it or whether or not you can relate to it. I think it's important that we don't constantly preach to the choir in that respect. It is difficult because obviously sometimes you'll be talking about something very specific. Like if I'm talking about transphobia, it's very specific to trans people. So people who aren't trans might not understand that or not be able to empathise with that. However, that should be an opportunity for them to actually learn something. So I don't really try and make it too specific.
And Sassy?
For me, it's a combination of two sides. I want to inspire disabled people to travel because I genuinely think if travel is made accessible, then anyone should be able to travel regardless of their disability. And I also really just want to educate the wider world of non-disabled people that we are just like everyone else. And the big thing I kind of bang on about online is about adding photo descriptions to social media and blogs and things like that people don't know exist. And so I'm kind of here to just keep kind of knocking on your door and saying, hey, did you know that you could do this and it would make it more accessible to an audience you may not even realise you had? And so many people are just blown away by that, and it's nice to be able to kind of say, I've helped people and educated people, but also helped my own peers who are visually impaired because they are now accessing blogs and social media that they didn't before.
So I want to talk about the media at large, travel space, film, television, music. And I've noticed that there are microaggressions everywhere. I think most of us have seen these microaggressions, but part of the problem is that people of the majority that these microaggressions or pandering, they don't impact, they don't see those. So as content creators, how can we stop ourselves from making these marginalizing terms, comments, creating content that further marginalizes the people that we might be considering helping? Jamie?
So do you mean like how can we get the other people who are confused to get on board?
Yes.
That's a great question. I think something that I always try and do is I don't necessarily pander to people's naivety all of the time. I think a lot of people have this very rainbow-coated, sugar-coated view of like, well, if the intention is right, then that's fine. It's like, well, the intention could be right, but you could be sitting there calling me a fucking freak. So, you know, intention most of the time for me doesn't really work. I think it's about making sure that, yes, we talk about marginalisation and we offer education, but also it's about making sure that you do the work behind the scenes that allows you to then just be knowledgeable. Don't constantly come to marginalised content creators for your education. We're here to share a lived experience, but unless you're going to send me an invoice in 30 days, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to treat me like a human being, essentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think educating people is so important, but you don't want to always be that angry person online. And I, for one, I like to hope I don't come across as very angry, and I want to teach people how they can help, rather than just be like, you need to do this right now.
Yeah, I definitely think education is very important, and I guess I'm kind of on the other side of the coin, because for me, I probably wouldn't have had a blog if I didn't want to educate, and for me that's what keeps me going from the days where I'm like, you know, I've got a really small audience and no one's reading it, and the people that I really would like to educate are the, you know, quote unquote big bloggers and Instagrammers that don't realise that alt text's so important. And then you'll have a comment from someone in India who's like, I'm a 15-year-old teenager and you're making me see the world in a different way because I have visual impairment, but my country is as forward-thinking as yours, and I hope that one day it becomes like yours and we get the same opportunities as you. And so, yeah, for me, I definitely agree that we shouldn't be the marginalised society that you look for just for your entertainment or education. And I definitely agree with Jamie, especially with regards to you know, we live lives regardless of who we are, what we are, and what we do. But yeah, for me, it's kind of how I'm here today. So I'll just take that one.
Okay, so the next one's a two-part question. I'll start with you, Sassy. What can brands and PR do better at being inclusive, as well as who's doing it right?
That's really good. Okay, so what from a very, very basic standpoint is, I guess, especially when it comes to traveling and working with micro-influencers from like kind of like the minority, is just see our value that, you know, I probably have less than 10,000 followers over 3 major platforms. I probably only get about 5,000 page views per month. But actually, I bring a lot of value to my audience who are disabled and non-disabled. And it's the fact of remembering that we have value even though we're in a world full of stats. And I think as well is, if you can, try and include and promote accessibility and accessible tourism, whether that's speaking to the local tourism boards and saying, hey, did you know you can put in a ramp that your local council can pay for, just to make this castle or this museum more accessible for those in wheelchairs? Or you could add a hearing loop, or you could add braille menus in your restaurants. And I would guess the people that I feel, and it is definitely more a brand rather than a travel company or anything like that, the people that I think are doing great are Apple, because they incorporate accessibility without it being an issue. It's part of the package. You don't pay extra for it. No one knows about it unless you need it. And that's the beauty. I think that's where we should be. It shouldn't be, oh, it's a visually impaired person. Oh, it's a person in a wheelchair. Oh, it's a trans person. It should be, okay, this is just people living their lives, and it's part of the package.
And I want to put a little spin on that, Jimmy, because you've had issues with inclusivity, discrimination, microaggressions in film. So, from that perspective, what can these major corporate, like film producers, key grips, how can people be more inclusive of marginalized communities?
Yeah, would just like to point out that I was only in a film twice and not a film star yet. But I guess that falls under the category of like modelling and such. So I was, about 18 months ago, I was cast as an extra in the Fantastic Beasts films. Yeah, but
That's so cool.
it was, I mean,
Oh, you gotta hear the rest of the story, Sassy. You gotta, calm down.
it was cool, yeah, it was cool. It was interesting. No, it was just a situation, like you said, of microaggression. So as someone who is non-binary, having a situation that is heavily gendered into male and female, for me isn't a situation that is accessible, whereas I was the only person of that gender identity, so therefore I wasn't catered for in that situation. It was a very hyper-masculine environment, which nobody enjoys. And it was just a situation where I was like, well, no one's doing anything about this. I've not signed an NDA, so I'm just going to talk about it. And I put it on Twitter, and then literally the next day, I woke up to a lot of drama, which was quite unique. But I guess that as a model, to do better, I always say is to hire the people that you're working with in front of the camera, behind the camera, and at the very initial stages of your process. If you're a brand, make sure that you are hiring whatever group of people you're working with publicly, also privately, so that consultants, photographers, creative directors, that kind of thing, so that it's a seamless process throughout. Because what happens is brands will use marginalised groups in front of the camera, and then when problems arise, they're like, oh, we don't know why this has happened. And then because I always ask, I'm like, oh, well, how many trans people have you had working behind the scenes? They're like, oh, none. And I'm like, well, there we go.
Okay, Kirsty, I want to pass this one off to you. It's the same question, but about creators. So what could fellow creators do to be more inclusive in their content?
So personally, I think what the best thing that other creators can do is support you. So whether that's sharing people on your Instagram, sharing a campaign that they're running, just sharing anything about them, and just not just showing people that you relate to personally, because even if you don't relate to them, you never know how many people on your feed could and how it could help them. I think just giving them a platform to speak as well. I know there's a couple of people that are here today, I don't know if they're in this room, but they've let me speak on their podcast, even though their podcast has nothing to do with plus size travel. They've given me that platform so that they can show their readers that they're interested in it, and they never know who could benefit from the information.
And Sassy, I know where you're going with this.
I don't know. I find it a kind of tricky question, I guess, because I believe exactly as Kirsty said, you definitely should support your creators. But it depends if you believe in it, and if you also think it would be useful to your audience. Because I don't want to be inspiration porn. I don't want to be, oh look, that blind girl did this. Even though I might label that on Instagram or YouTube because I know it'll get more views, it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be your source of inspiration of, well, the worst thing you can have is a bad attitude or a disability. And it's like, I don't believe that. But I don't know, I think I'm going on a tangent here, but I just think we should all be supporting each other regardless. And I think this is especially why Traverse and the travel community is my favourite place on earth, because I am a nobody in the eyes of brands and working on online sphere, and I walk into a room and people greet me like they've known me for 10 years, and that's amazing because they are huge influencers. They've run millions of campaigns and they have what's classed as influence, but actually they speak to me just like anyone else, and that's what I appreciate more than anything else.
So along those lines, I have a question. Are you comfortable with people who do not fit your marginalized status creating content discussing your community and marginalization? For example, I did a campaign years ago called #MyGayPride, and I'm not gay. And I created the content from a straight perspective, straight allies perspective, and I relayed the information that I was given by the gay men and gay women that were on that project. And I got torn apart for it because a lot of people within the community didn't feel it was appropriate for me to be on that campaign or create content speaking for that community. So I want to start with you, Jamie. Do you believe that that's appropriate, or if it's not appropriate, how can people be allies within a content creation space?
Yeah, I think it's like, if, for example, if you look at Pride season this year, you had brands like Boohoo, fashion brands, who created a Pride range. So then they were basically called out for paying the straight influencers more money to promote the Pride range compared to the LGBTQ plus influencers who were not paid the same or not paid. So it's about making sure, like, whenever I go into any situation, panels, anything, I always investigate and kind of look at the scope of people that are in that space, and I think, is my voice necessary here? Do I need to take my voice away? Can I fill it with someone else's voice who is more prominent? Like, I was supposed to be doing a talk next week in Cheltenham, and they sent through the panellists, and it was like 3 cis, so cis is like not trans, 3 cis, white, straight women, and then me. And I was like, this is a discussion on diversity. I'm pulling out because A, it's tokenistic, and B, so it's about, just like analysing where you're going and being like, is my voice necessary here? If it's not, maybe I should take a step back. But if I still want to do it as an ally, know that you are not the centre of that conversation. It's like, for example, the common question for UK Black Pride is, are white people allowed to come? And it's like, of course you can come as an ally, you just have to know that that day is not centered around your lived experience. So you go to support the groups that are being celebrated.
I think personally for me it would be quite strange if someone that was straight size started talking about plus size things, because one, I don't think necessarily they would understand them as much, but I think it's very similar to what you're saying, not to make it about them, and although there's an issue in the ways that they can support, for them to all of a sudden turn it around and make it about them would probably seem a little uncomfortable to me. I'm not saying don't do it, but I think there are better ways around it maybe.
And Sass?
See, it's hard because I actually really agree with your campaign. The fact that you are being an ally and you got lived experiences from your community. Just because you're not a gay man doesn't mean that you can't speak and be an ally. I think it doesn't work if people are putting out content or saying things on your behalf that they haven't educated themselves on from a start, or being used any appropriate people. I read something and I wrote a very angry email which I never responded to. I won't name who they are, but they basically wrote about blindness and how we're so incapable and how hard our lives must be, and we should really pat the blind people on the back because they get out of bed every day and they haven't killed themselves yet. And it's like, well, thanks so much. But then I have done many campaigns that I've been involved in with local charities or even just blogging friends where they said, hey Sassy, I'd love to know your lived experience of travelling with a disability. And me and 20 other creators have all piped up with our experience. And yes, maybe that person also travels with a disability, but if they don't, I don't think we should shame them or put them down, but I do believe it's context, as you said. Because, if you're plus size, and then you've got someone who's not plus size talking about how it feels to be plus size, it's slightly different than if you're asking your community, okay, from LGBT perspective, how would this work for you? And then you put out a piece of content saying, so-and-so on Twitter said this, and screenshot with their permission what they've said. I think that works, but it's, yeah.
So I found that within our communities, African Americans, plus size, LGBTQ, disabled, there's this perception within the content creation community that we're a monolith, that we all kind of think alike. And I think this panel has shown that the way that we look at the same situations is going to be vastly different based on our lived experiences. So my question for you is, how as a community do you, because we're still marginalized communities, individually so, but we still are. As content creators, how do you think we can move forward to not only elevate each other, but elevate the conversation in general around a lack of diversity in the content creation space? I'll start with you. That's good.
I went to a dinner last night for a shoe brand, and I didn't realise, but the dinner got co-opted by halfway through. They're basically like, we've brought you all here today to discuss how we can do better in all of our pride campaigns. And I was like, for fuck's sake. I was like, come here for dinner, and like this isn't a consultancy meeting. And what I took away from it was that, like, not to be rude to content creation, but like in the grand scheme of things, in a marginalised community, is creating interesting content going to change legislation? No. Is it going to like actually genuinely change people's lives or like really push us out of marginalisation? No. Is it helpful in that fight? Absolutely. And that's why we do it and that's why we love it. But I think it's about making sure that we look at content creation for what it is, and we don't put it at like the peak of social change. It's like, because brands constantly like, how do we do better? How do we do pride better? How do we speak for these voices better? And I'm like just, you should know. Like, you kind of should just know, and if you don't, fine, but like, also realise that it's not the be-all and end-all. There are actually more important things like, in terms of travel, this year I've been campaigning with the government to allow non-binary people to have passports, because at the moment I can't have a passport. So there are things like that that are like on the ground, real kind of struggles that people have that actually need to be focused on more, which you can do through content creation. But I think it's about putting content creation into perspective and being like, yeah, this is really great, but like, let's also focus on the really important grassroots activism of where our communities lie.
Okay, we're running a little low on time. We all started late, unfortunately. So I want to open the floor up to questions. So I'll be roaming around with the mic. So does anybody have a question for anybody on now? In front?
Hi, I have a bit of a technical question for Sassy, because I've noticed that you're adding description in the captions. It's something I've never even considered. I always try to add alt text, but I have some sort of a bug on Instagram and it's not coming through. So that's what I want to ask. Thanks.
Sorry, I missed the last bit. Could you repeat that last bit?
Well, no, just mostly about the alt text and putting the descriptions in captions.
How
does
do
that
it?
work? Well, yeah, from your side. Because
Oh, you mean
obviously,
from-
I know how to.
How do I personally
Yes,
input
how
it?
do you use that?
Well, that's the irony, because I take pictures and I can use, so my Apple phone, if I take a picture, I can actually label it. But the difference is, unless I label it there and then, knowing exactly what I'm wearing, what we were doing that day, if I add it to my blog, I'll then have to get Grant to upload it and input the alt text. And it's so ironic, because I'm the one that strives for everyone else to write alt text. But if there isn't alt text on my own pictures before I've uploaded them, it will just read all the numbers to me as an image or a JPEG or whatever it is. And then I have to pretend that I know what it is. And so I'll use other apps. I'll use apps that are accessible to me, and I'll screenshot it, I'll send the app across, and then it will say, you know, blonde girl, usually blonde child as well. Blonde child in the grass field, and I'm like, yeah, okay, great. And that's actually me. I'm nearly 29, but hey ho. But yeah, so it's almost ironic, because unless I do it there and then and it's fresh in my memory, what I'm wearing, what I'm doing, I actually need friends to write them, or my partner to write them for me. I have a really beautiful picture of my fiance and I kissing in a field that my friend Daniel, who's here today, took it. But he also wrote the caption, and it was amazing because guide dogs got in touch with me. I was like, your alt text of you guys in the field kissing was really beautiful. It told a fantastic story. Did you write that? And I was like, no. So it's so, I have to try my best. I try my best, I'll put my name in, whoever's in the image. But when it's got real detail and it tells a story, someone else has done it for me.
And I totally forgot to mention this at the beginning. They're using Slido.com to ask questions. So if you guys don't want to verbally ask it, you can ask through the app right now. It's connected to the Borderless Live app. And I believe she actually just answered that question. So the question was, no, you did it right. But what can other travel bloggers do to be more accessible to people with a visual disability besides the description of pictures? Is there anything that you didn't just say that would... I think you kind of cleared that up, so I think.
I'd probably say that. It's try and tell a story. That's where I really get it, because I appreciate if you just say black dog lying on the floor looking cute, because I'm like, oh, black dog lying on the floor looking cute, great. But if you say Ida lying frog dog legs with her face like hiding under her paws, I'm like, nah, that's adorable. So you're kind of creating a story within what you say, but I appreciate that takes people more time, and not everyone has that time. So even just putting dog lying on floor or a black dog lying on floor is amazing to me.
Or make a podcast.
Yes, the other extra thing I would say that isn't just about social media, it's about YouTube, is adding closed captions, which is for the hearing impaired, but it's also for the visually impaired and for those who speak other languages. Because if you add closed captions to your videos, it runs through as SEO, which means your video gets ranked higher, but it also means that those with other learning disabilities can read along as the video is playing. And then for someone like me, adding audio description, I love travel films, but I do sit there thinking, oh, that's really nice music, what's going on now? But I understand, because it's about beauty, it's about seeing it with your eyes, whereas I try and incorporate a story, and even in the bits that I put on my own YouTube, I'll say Sassy's walking down the corridor, or Sassy trips over and walks into a wall, because I do that a lot. So you're just explaining what's going on. I know it's a bit mundane, but those are the two different ways you can add it. You can either do it through audio or you can do it through writing. And that way it's giving your audience kind of more opportunities to access your content.
Great. Do we have another question from before? Oh, right here. Moving back.
Hey guys. I recently took part in a TV commercial, and I thought it went really well, but then once it's come out, it's for a hair care brand, and they have only posted pictures of white blonde people. I'm not that. So how do you navigate, or if you've experienced anything like that, how do you navigate that? Do you have any recommendations? Do you think that I should talk to them? I've been paid, so does it really matter? Yeah.
Yes, I think.
So, you should talk to him. Your lawyer should talk to him, and your agent should talk to him. You got guilt. I think for me, I prefer and enjoy creative control. So any campaign that I'm involved in, I have approval on the final product. If not, I'm not doing it because of this exact situation, because I don't want my likeness or me as a person to be misrepresented. Now, I'm sure it's different if you're working on big Hollywood films, but in our content creation space, we have a lot of power and a lot of freedom. I think one of the issues that content creators have, especially micro-influencers, is they almost sign anything. And they don't realize that their likeness is being used however the company sees fit. Read your contracts and get somebody else to read them. You guys want to, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's about like making sure that, like, because that happens to me a lot as well. Like, I will be put in as like the token queer person, but then I'll be put in at like the very end, or just like for like half a second. I mean, you could think of it in different ways. You could be like, I got paid, move on. But then it's also like more important than thinking than that. To be honest, it's more kind of like, you should definitely say something. And I think if you're worried, because I know you just said you don't have an agent or any representation. When I first started, I know this is very common, but just like I made up an assistant. Because bizarrely, like psychologically, people are more likely to listen to you if they feel like you are here, up here, and there's someone in between you. And it sounds twatish, but like, if you create that allure of like, you are unattainable, which you are, then you've got more of a leg to stand on, which is awful. Like, it's not something that I enjoy, but it's sadly true specifically within that industry. But yeah.
So yeah, I definitely agree. Speak to them. If something's making you feel uncomfortable, and the sooner you voice your opinions, the better, because I think it's only going to continue to happen. And if you say you're unhappy with it, you might get a different result. I mean, I don't know if you will. The adverts obviously ad now, but in future, if you keep standing your ground, change will happen.
Wait, can we just ask I mean, if you're comfortable, they literally already sent me clauses of the contract that people are going to If you go to their Instagram, they literally post the people on Instagram, they send you out, so you go to their Instagram, it's all like white blonde people or blonde mixed celebrity who has like 1 million followers. So it does make me feel
Wyatt, yeah, if you tell Marty, nobody else is going to find out. Don't worry about it. Yeah, we got a lot.
Share it and we'll comment.
Oh, I think one of the things I would love for you guys to take away from this, no matter if you're plus size or gay or straight or cis or non or blind, is that the important thing is that we ride for each other, and that you speak up when you see something wrong, or somebody you care about, or maybe you don't care about, points out something is wrong. There's so many times there are people in the Black travel space. Marty will tell you, we talk a lot in our community, and I'm sure Jamie would say within his community and Sassy, and we have our close communities. But when we're together, we're unstoppable. We are unstoppable, and these brands have no choice but to recognize it. So reach out to everybody that's not only in your community, but also in other marginalized communities that aren't being represented as well. Like if somebody doesn't look like Jamie, say something. If somebody doesn't look like Seth, say something. And then we'll kind of ride in and help where we can. You know? So next question. Do you feel that companies are put off from working with you because of your disability or uniqueness, or do they see it as an attraction? I want to talk with you about this, Jamie, and I'm going to give my standpoint. And we were also talking about this, the positives of our status or our marginalized position. For me, it's actually a benefit, and I get in a little bit of trouble within the Black travel space is because I don't tend to come across as militant as some of my colleagues do, because I look at my Blackness as my asset. I'm blessed to be perceived as a big, dangerous Black man. Nobody messes with me. I've never been pickpocketed, robbed, mugged, none of that. However, but when I smile and I engage people are like, oh my God, you're like Chris Rock. Like, yeah, that's how people talk. And I've been Steve Harvey, I've been Obama, I've been every Black man you can think of. But I personally find that to be an asset. Other people don't in my community. So when it comes to brands, I have to ask myself, am I being tokenized right now? Am I being the token Black guy for this brand, for this project, for this panel? And I said this before, don't put me on stage because I'm Black. Put me on stage because I'm talented. And I think that's what we have to watch out for when it comes to things like this question. And Jimmy, what do you think about this? Because I find that somebody of your flamboyant nature and look and personality, you will be put in that position in quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you in one sense, but I would say I'm a bit more, maybe a smidge more of the militant that you're talking about. I guess it's about, like, I know that I'm unique and I represent a part of the queer community, but also there is no one way to look trans. So I think a lot of brands see my face and they kind of see that I'm able-bodied and that I'm skinny and I'm white and that I still suit a certain narrative. I've just got like one little thing that's a bit different that they are deeming palatable. So that's when I kind of take it a bit sourly, because I'm like, well, this isn't, like, you don't actually care. Also, for me, like, as a non-binary person, there are lots of kind of very easy acts of allyship, but lots of kind of social situations that if I'm on a shoot, I need to be taken care of. So like neutral spaces, neutral bathrooms, the fact that I use they, them pronouns, like there's just lots of things that if I'm in a space and people aren't doing that, I know that I'm being tokenized, or I know that the levels of care or authenticity behind me being involved in that space is not real. It's just because you like my face, which sometimes if the zeros are there, I'll do it. But yeah, it is definitely frustrating. But I think what they don't realise is that we know what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Like, that we talk, we know. Like it's borderline like mutually exploitative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this question is for the ladies. You all have an aim to achieve through educating people or giving marginals a voice, or marginalized people's voice. Do you feel you can accept work which is totally off brand, or do you just say no? Start with Sassy.
I haven't had many opportunities from in that way. But I would 100% say no. Because I'm too cocksure of myself and who I am and who I want to be on and offline. So if you come to me and how do I put it? Basically, I was given the opportunity to write a piece for somewhere, and when I said some things on the telephone, and they kind of jotted it down and created a script almost for me, and I said, no, you're not portraying me like this because that isn't who I am. I may not have been as articulate on the phone as I maybe can be as a writer. But I basically took notes, scribbled everything out, rewrote it and said, if you would like to continue, this is what you can publish, otherwise feel free not to use me. But I've never had it to the point where, they've asked me to pretend to be sighted. So I wouldn't know in that regard.
I've actually never had any opportunities that are directly related to plus size travel. I actually don't think they exist at the moment. No one has specifically come to me and said, we want a plus size person perspective on this specific thing. I have taken opportunities where I've been allowed to travel and I know I'm allowed to have my voice and I can talk about my plus size perspective. So I have recently been on a press trip where I surfed and I wrote about how awful the experience was and that it was not for me. I was humiliated getting into the wetsuit, and they were okay with that, and that's the kind of representation I want from brands. I want them to say, you can have your voice. If you don't enjoy it, you can say and you can tell people that it's maybe not for you.
And we have 15 seconds left, so what I want to do is that each person on the panel say the number one thing that you want people to take away from this panel about inclusivity and content creation. And I want to start with Jane.
I guess it would just be, again, prioritizing where it is in the grand scheme of things, knowing that, yes, it's important, but it should start a conversation, not just be the end, the full stop.
Sass?
Collaborate and have each other's backs.
And I would say ride with each other. Same with Sassy, support people who don't look like you, because that's going to get other people to support you.
Yeah, I would say you don't have to have some kind of diverse thing about you in order to get involved in the movement.
Okay, that's it for us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, happy hours are starting, so let's go.